Local programming on KRWG Public Media made possible in part by viewers like you. Thank you.
This is KRWG Public Media, TV, radio, online, news that matters. Now, across the Mesilla Valley and the borderland, the stories that shape our community. From the KRWG Broadcast Center at New Mexico State University, this is Newsmakers.
Welcome to Newsmakers. I'm Anthony Moreno. On the program, we'll discuss the environment in our borderland region with a focus on water. We'll be joined by an NMSU professor who was selected to serve on the Environmental Protection Agency's Good Neighbor Board. More on that in a few minutes. We begin this program with a closer look at water in the Mesilla Valley. The drought has forced many farmers to adapt how they irrigate crops, but experts warn that rising temperatures in our region may impact water conservation efforts. KRWG's Johnny Coker has more.
The Rio Grande is once again flowing down from Colorado through southern New Mexico. But the water currently running is destined for use in Mexico and Texas, while New Mexico's irrigation season won't begin until June, as announced by the Elephant Butte Irrigation District. Farmers in the Mesilla Valley have historically been reliant on river water for crops, but the ongoing drought has led many to dependence on groundwater. Ken Stark, owner of La Viña Winery in southern Doña Ana County, explained that even the well-pumped water is at risk due to the lack of moisture that's stricken the area.
It's a scary feeling because my well was drilled back in the 1950s originally. In those days, they didn't drill irrigation wells but a couple hundred feet deep. The guys that have put in wells in the last 10 years, especially most of them have been people that farm pecans, and they're putting wells in that are 500 to 1,000 feet deep. And these old wells like mine, at some point in time, are going to be too shallow.
Stark has implemented an underground drip system in his vineyard as a water-saving technique. But even so, groundwater levels continue to drop as the years go on.
Hopefully we'll just find a way to exist in a dry climate. I mean, if you look at municipalities, what they've done, they've curtailed their use of water a great deal. And so I think that helps, and the farmers conserving water like I do makes it where we can say, look, we're doing our part, you guys do your part,
According to the U.S. Drought Monitor, nearly the entire state of New Mexico is experiencing some level of drought conditions. This, combined with record-breaking temperatures from last year, has some experts concerned. Dr. Dave Dubois is the state climatologist for New Mexico. He said that rising temperatures linked to climate change are exacerbating water conservation efforts throughout the state.
Our aquifer for water is doing pretty good, but all of our aquifers are finite resources. And once we extract them, the recharge is very, very, very slow on a lot of these aquifers. So how much water do we expect to be using more than we are now? And a lot of that's driven by climate, because when we have warmer temperatures, crops need more water. And when we have drought, the atmosphere is actually thirstier, meaning water is evaporating from the soils as well as evaporating from the plants themselves.
Dr. Dubois said that there are techniques to cope with continued drought and the lack of fresh water, but those techniques come with an associated cost, both environmental and monetary.
There's ways to manage when we don't have water, so using different engineering technologies and methods to basically reuse it. And so there's a technological challenge, and it's always going to yield a cost. How much does it cost? How much are you willing to pay if you're going to use this alternative source of water? And what are their new technologies, and can we wait for those?
Dr. Phil King is an engineering advisor for the Elephant Butte Irrigation District. In a television interview with KRWG, Dr. King said that he's optimistic about New Mexico's water future with the implementation of legislation and ongoing work with affected communities. But Dr. King said it's ultimately going to take effort from all parties to get the state where it needs to be.
I think on a global scale, things are pretty bleak. Our failure as a species to respond to climate change is disappointing. When I look at the commitment both in the state agencies, in the communities, and in a lot of the water management entities, they are very realistic about it. They are looking to be adaptive, and I am hoping that with that mindset and a good, strong community spirit, we can move into the realities of the 21st century.
Back down at Lavinia Winery, Ken Stark said he's doing his best to conserve the water that he has, with the hopes that the drought won't be the end of his winery.
Who knows when the drought's going to be over? But our water is limited, and if we all have to drink out of the same tap, sooner or later, the guys with the big straw is going to suck it so hard that my well's going to be dry. I think that if we live in a more conservative way, that at least it'll last longer, and that's all you can do.
For now, hope remains high for a strong monsoon season, with southern New Mexicans looking for respite from 2023's record-breaking temperatures. For KRWG Public Media, I'm Johnny Coker.
Our featured guest on the program is Dr. Christopher Brown, Professor of Geography and Environmental Studies at New Mexico State University. He is also the co-director of the NMSU Spatial Applications Research Center. Dr. Brown was recently appointed by the Environmental Protection Agency to serve on a board which advises the President and Congress on environmental infrastructure needs in states that border Mexico. In 2020, Dr. Brown was named the inaugural Faculty Fellow for the Beyond Borders Community of Practice. He is also a new member of KRWG's Patron Board. Dr. Brown, thanks for joining us.
Thank you for inviting me. It's an honor to be here.
I'd like to start off by learning a little bit more about the EPA's Good Neighbor Board. Can you share with us a history of it?
The Good Neighbor Environment Board was established by national legislation to be an advisory body to the United States Congress and to the President. We operate through the Office on the Council on Environmental Quality, and there are probably about 30 board members that come from academia, the public sector, the business sector, governmental agencies, and we meet 3 times a year to focus on issues of concern. We write advice letters that are published maybe once or twice a year. We also issue an annual or a biannual report that focuses on a particular set of issues: border environment infrastructure, clean air, clean water, whatever the current desire of the board is to focus on. Of interest, we had a board meeting this morning on picking the topic for the next set of topic letters and the next set of reports. So it's a very collaborative organization, much like KRWG.
I see. Now, you have experience on this board. You've served on it before. Can you tell us a little bit about that experience?
Sure. I served on the board from 2006 to 2010. What's particularly exciting about that time is that was before the pandemic. It was when we met 3 times a year, 2 times in border cities along the U.S.-Mexico border, and then our spring meeting was in D.C. And we would go to D.C., and we're not allowed to lobby, that's against the statute, but we are allowed to share information. And so we would meet in D.C., reveal the report, and then share information with staffers. It goes through a formal channel through the Council on Environmental Quality. We're not sure if President Biden has it on his reading table, but one can only hope.
What do you see right now in our region as some of the most pressing issues when it comes with water? Let's start with that.
As you noted in the introductory piece that you shared, we're in a long period of drought, and we're under very, very strong adverse impacts of climate change. I think we're facing a climate crisis in the basin. We're seeing above average temperatures. I believe that I saw a news piece that had over 60 days of temperatures above 100 degrees in El Paso last summer. I wouldn't be surprised if we exceeded that this summer. So we have increasing extreme temperatures during the summer. We're having increasing storm events and increasing demand on regional water resources. And so we're starting to see lower levels of surface water availability in the Rio Grande project. Farmers and agricultural producers, as well as cities, are drawing on groundwater to meet those needs. So it's really a climate crisis where we're seeing these large-scale climatological and environmental impacts. At the same time, we have three vibrant regional economies in the region, Las Cruces, El Paso, and Ciudad Juarez, that are all trying to make the trains run and provide water to industry, to provide water to people, to provide water to the environment as well as agriculture.
Do you think the alarm is sounding loud enough for this issue right now?
I don't know that the alarm can ever sound loud enough for this issue. This is an existential crisis that we're facing. We're already seeing cities in Arizona that are having their surface water, potable water supply terminated because the municipality that was serving them for many years is unable to do that anymore. So I think it's all hands on deck, that we really need to be very focused on it and use the best available science and political leadership we can to advance solutions to the problems we're facing.
Can you share a little bit about the research that you're working on in this area and have worked on in the past to really share more information about this issue and how folks can really adapt to this warming climate?
Sure. For many years, and I am still involved with the Paso del Norte Watershed Council. The Paso del Norte Watershed Council is an advisory body that consists of business people, academic researchers, agricultural producers that looks at the Paso del Norte watershed, and that runs from San Marcial Gauge up in the Rio Grande Project down to Presidio in the southernmost portion of the basin. And we've worked very extensively to bring GIS tools to bear on surface water modeling, watershed education efforts, and this was an effort that involved people from Texas A&M, UTEP, New Mexico State University, agricultural producers and business people. And so we spent a good deal of time working to advance the work of the council, and then there were nested research projects in there. We built a coordinated database that's built on geographic information systems technology that provided kind of a one-stop shop, if you will, to access water resource data for the region. That was a long-standing project. We're currently in discussions with members of the International Boundary Water Commission to provide an advisory mechanism by which academics across the border would be sharing information and data from research that we're doing with members of leadership with the IBWC and its Mexican counterpart, La Comisión Internacional de Límites y Aguas. There are two sections to the IBWC, a U.S. section called the IBWC and a Mexican section called SILA. So we're very interested in working with leadership to see if we can come up with a mechanism by which we can share information and research with them that would be useful to their charge.
How do you feel that sharing that information can really help everyone in the region who depend on this incredibly important resource?
Issues we're facing with respect to climate change, the climate crisis, increasing demand for water resources, really requires lots of different perspectives. So we need to talk to sociocultural anthropologists, we need to talk to geographers, we need to talk to political scientists. And a lot of the folks that have been involved in these discussions represent different academic interests. So I'm a faculty member, so I'm part of the academic industry, if you will, and we feel that we have a lot to share and bring information and data to bear on that particular issue. So I think multiple viewpoints, multiple channels, all hands on deck to try to solve these challenges that we're facing.
As far as our resources go on the border with the issue of water, what has your research shown you that, how long we may have with this issue if we don't continue to take some drastic steps?
Previous to the year 2000, the Rio Grande Project delivered a relatively regular supply of surface water. As we started to enter these increasingly deep drought cycles, if you will, there was less surface water in the system. And so agricultural producers used groundwater extraction to provide water to grow the crops that they're using to feed the community in the region. The cities, in turn, are looking to groundwater resources. And the question is, how much is left? And so perhaps at another time, you can bring Phil King on board, who's a geohydrologist that worked at NMSU for many years. We don't know how long the groundwater supply in the region is going to last. We just don't.
Yeah, and as far as policy goes, I mean, you're working on a group that may actually shine some light on some issues that could affect policy. So how important is it for you to have great communication amongst each other so that you get everything accurate and correct?
It's very important to have communication on the Good Neighbor Board. So we're having regular conference calls to look at the structure of the reports, the topics of the reports. We've got this wonderful Zoom technology, which makes it very, very easy for us to bring a large number of people together. So that communication channel is wide open. With respect to the region, I teach environmental planning, I teach urban geography. I tell my students, if you're interested in the manner by which we're building cities, the way we plan to use water and land resources, this is a wonderful place to live. We're a small, less populous state, a large state with a lower population. You can get FaceTime with United States senators and representatives. You can get FaceTime with city councilors. If I was a faculty member at UCLA, I don't think I'd get much FaceTime with the city council or with the senators in California. So the fact that we're a smaller population and we have really good connections to our political officials makes it very easy for us to have discussions with them. And that's been really, really exciting. At certain times, we walk in the fall and campaign for them. And then when they're successful in winning seats, we're able to sit down and have discussions about water resource management issues. I do a lot of work with the city of Las Cruces looking at the land development code to support the comprehensive plan for the city. And so multiple channels, multiple people, information flows quite freely among all of these different players.
How do you feel that the design of cities in our region is going to be different than it was perhaps 50 years ago?
We're smarter. We're more aware of some of the unintended consequences. There's a very strong focus within the folks working on this land development code to advance a concept known as complete streets that provide safe and effective transportation for all modes of travel. 50 years ago, cars, trucks, buses, and pedestrians and bicyclists tied for last. We're trying to flip that paradigm and say, we want to build transportation infrastructure that meets all of the needs of all of the people in all of the modes. We're also having some very interesting discussions about more creative stormwater management mechanisms. So we often look to our sister city to the west and look at what Tucson's doing because they've been very, very progressive on all of these fronts. So there are stormwater management ideas, there are complete streets ideas. Another thing that's become incredibly important is affordable housing. We're facing a regional, state, and national housing crisis. And so one of the modules in my little planning class brings people in from the city of Las Cruces, Natalie Green and Nicole Martinez from the Community of Hope, to talk about affordable housing. So we're smarter, we're more informed, and we're starting to look at a lot of the issues that we historically hadn't looked at.
You mentioned Tucson in Arizona, a city a few hours away from Las Cruces. What are some of the key things that you've noticed that they're doing right? You mentioned a couple things there, but is there something that you think Las Cruces can really look at to make big strides in the next couple of years or next few years?
Sure. The first of these is one I mentioned already, this idea of complete streets, just being more progressive and more proactive about transportation planning. My dear friend, peer, and mentor, Bob Zerniak, says, here's A and here's B. What's the best way to get from A to B? Bus, transit, bike, walk? The best way to get from A to B is to put them close together, to build and design cities so that the things that we need to do in our daily lives are more accessible and more proximal. Tucson has also done very, very interesting work at urban green infrastructure, the manner by which we build stormwater collection and management systems, and then use that to vegetate urban areas, which provides habitat for wildlife. We can have passive recreational and enjoyable facilities that way. So I think those are two areas where we look to Tucson quite often to try to figure out how to do things a little bit better.
How does technology play a role in the research that you've done recently and are continuing to work on? You mentioned a number of things, just using GIS tools to better understand our water resources in the area. Can you share a little bit more about that?
Sure. The company that vends the largest GIS pool box is Esri, and their motto is the science of where. So all of the things that we're studying exist in a particular place. We can geographically reference that place. We can do modeling and data manipulation and analysis to try to get at it. So desktop GIS&T, we've got a GIS&T right here. It's called our mapping app. So mapping applications, unstaffed aerial vehicles, drones are often frequently used. We have a drone within our department that has several multispectral sensors on it, as well as a really high-res camera. So we're able to deploy these vehicles to capture data in real time that can then be downloaded, georeferenced, and brought right into these mapping systems. And so the fact that a lot of these are becoming web-based makes them much, much more accessible. We don't need a $5,000 Unix workstation sitting on a desk to do this stuff anymore. We can open a laptop computer and connect to ArcGIS Online and do a lot of the manipulations that we used to do in an expensive workstation environment. So it's very helpful. They're great tools.
Getting back to the Good Neighbor Board and the work that you're doing, looking at infrastructure, environmental infrastructure within states that border Mexico, what do you see right now as the biggest challenges with that issue of environmental infrastructure in border states?
A challenge that we talked about when we were preparing is the Good Neighbor Environment Board's legislative mandate is to look at environmental, infrastructure, human health, and water resource issues along the U.S.-Mexico border in U.S. states. But all of these issues are inherently binational in nature. So we had a very lively discussion this morning about how do we stay within statute and still have intelligent discussions with colleagues and peers in Mexico, because most of these issues are occurring in binational twin cities. Ciudad Juarez and El Paso, San Diego, Tijuana, ambos Nogales are very good examples. So the tools are very helpful there. Getting the binational nature of it is very important. The issues that we talked about this morning that we want to focus on, we want to focus on the climate crisis and the manner by which we can build vulnerability in the community structures. We want to look at infrastructure and social justice needs that are part of that particular area. The La Paz Agreement was an agreement signed between the United States and Mexico to make a formal mechanism to have these binational environmental discussions. We're going to probably have a discussion about the 40th anniversary there. And I can't recall what the fourth topic was that we talked about this morning, but what's really neat is we've got 12 really smart people on this call, and we're having discussions about which things we think are very important. So a discussion we had this morning is, can we look at delivering potable water more effectively to colonias and help people meet their basic needs?
That's such a challenge in so many communities in our region, having clean, safe drinking water in our area. So can you share with us a little bit more about the challenges we're dealing with right now just in our region on that issue?
If you live within the service area of the El Paso Water Utilities and the city of Las Cruces, when you turn the tap on, safe potable water comes out. Many people in rural areas don't have that access to a large centralized potable water system. The colonias that exist within Texas and New Mexico are very, very extreme examples of that, where they just don't have the public infrastructure that's necessary to deliver clean, potable water to them on a regular basis. If we look within the Mexican portions of these twin cities, municipalities have made great progress in the last 20 or 30 years to deliver potable water, but there are still people in colonias in Texas and New Mexico and in Juarez that get their water delivered by a water truck into a tank encatchment that they have at their house. So that's been a very, very challenging situation. Equally as challenging is wastewater collection, treatment, and disposal. So those are two kind of interrelated issues that have provided big challenges to the region.
Moving from challenges, what about opportunities with this board? What sort of opportunities do you envision?
I think the thing that's going to be the most exciting thing about the board is you got 25 or 30 people coming from 25 or 30 different personal perspectives, professional perspectives, intellectual perspectives, if you will, and we're just going to have a discussion in the board about what are the 4 things that we want to focus on in the next year. An interesting issue that came up this morning is how can Kim Collins, who's the incoming chair of the Good Neighbor Board, build action teams, if you will, to say, we've got 4 topics, we've got 25 people at the table. How can we build 4 teams of people that have expertise and experience that are relevant to that particular topic to work on that particular chapter, if you will? And that's what's going to be really, really exciting, because I've got ideas. My dear colleague Steve Mummy at Colorado State has ideas. Our former chair Paul Ganster has ideas. But how do all those pieces come together in the discussion? And it's just going to be very, very exciting.
We have just under a minute left with you, but I'd like to hear from you. Do you remember what it was that first really made you interested in the U.S.-Mexico border?
Absolutely. I joined a PhD program at San Diego State and UC Santa Barbara. I did all my research and I had a bunch of really nice topics we were going to get to. I took a seminar on environment and population on the U.S.-Mexico border. Every student in the class grabbed a chapter. I grabbed water. I grabbed the Tijuana River watershed. And that's been really my professional focus ever since then, is looking at watershed approaches to solving these issues. And I still fondly remember that seminar. It was a turning point. It was a transformational moment.
Dr. Christopher Brown, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you for having me. It's been a pleasure and an honor.
That's it for this week's program. Don't forget, you can always stay updated with the latest news at krwg.org. For all of us at KRWG Public Media, thank you for being with us. I'm Anthony Moreno. We'll see you next time on Newsmakers.